Welcome one and all. Welcome to another session of In the Kitchen, which is an informal get-together with a Pacific regional expert of some kind. And today, we're really lucky to have with us today a man who's certainly influenced my narrative a lot with the development of Pacific Island Food Revolution. And that is Dr. Isimeli Tukana, who is the NCD, the Non-Communicable Disease Adviser to the Fijian Ministry of Health, to the Fijian government. But let me just add to that, which is not in the bio brief that you gave me, Buniwai, is that he's highly regarded regionally. And I know that when I've mentioned the fact that I've consulted with him over the development of Pacific Island Food Revolution, the regard that the region has for you was really high, and it's been really good for me too, Dr. Tukana. So welcome and great to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. Bula Vinaka from Fiji.
From warm Fiji. I'm so jealous about that. I wanted to talk today, Dr. Tukana, a little bit about your role has been around NCD strategies, defense, knowledge, public awareness, et cetera, and we've had this, and that was called like a crisis, and then we've had this other crisis come in, which of course is COVID-19, and I wonder if you could speak to the relationship between the two, the problematic relationship between the two.
Yes, I came into this. I'm trained at the Fiji School of Medicine in Suva, and all of us Pacific Islanders were trained at FSM until around 2000. We were trained on communicable disease. So COVID is a no-brainer to us. It's just that COVID is a new virus where we don't have a vaccine, but we know how to deal with communicable diseases like COVID, like in any other viruses.
Right.
But the challenge with the NCD, so we managed to deal with the COVID well in Fiji, because that's how we are trained also.
Right.
The only issue with the COVID at the moment is that we don't have a cure yet, but with good public health response, we managed to cure the 18 cases. And I think it's very important to note. So similarly in NCD, we need to shift to the public health response. I feel that if we give all the effort and the investment in the primary preventative, and in NCD is just food and exercise, we shift to the left in food and exercise, we'll kill NCD just like we've done COVID.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging. What is the irony is that actually NCDs are so preventable, and they're so very preventable through Fijian culture, through Pacific culture, through Pacific food culture. The answer sits right there. Now, I remember one of the first times I came to meet you, and you talked to me about, I was talking about food and how the food solution to diabetes, heart disease, etc., the NCDs in the Pacific, sits right in Pacific food culture. And I raised the notion of portion sizes to you. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And you said to me, don't change how much is on the plate, change what's on the plate.
Yes, exactly. That's what I said. We don't change the volume. We need to change the menu. Our shift into NCD is because we changed the menu. We never had NCD in the Pacific before 1985. And the only thing that has changed in the emergence of NCD is the menu. So when people talk about changing the volume, my specific thinking is, look, we like our food. We just need to understand that we've shifted, transited when we are moving from rural to urban, we've shifted. So you are right on the dot. For me in the Pacific, in the treatment of NCD, don't change the volume, just change the menu and go back to our Kai Pacifica foods.
That's right.
We were given.
That's right. And I think there's the idea of a diet, for example, often around food issues and in relationship to health, people talk about diet. But to me, the word diet summons up things that you can't have, things that are taken away from you. And to me, that would be highly unsuccessful in the Pacific context where food is beloved. And food is not just what you eat, it's how you develop community relationships. it's ceremonial, it's a celebration of identity. So I'm with you. I mean, by the way, I took that very, very seriously when you said that. And I was very relieved when you said that, because I don't want to tell anyone not to eat. I want to encourage them to eat just the right stuff.
Yes, yes. I've studied NCD enough to note that not all Fijians smoke. So I'm not really worried about tobacco. Not all Fijians drink kava or alcohol. Not all Fijians exercise, but all Fijians eat. And if we are to solve the NCD issue, we need to solve the eating issue. Nutrition is the important thing. And I've said before, it's the transition. We shifted. We seem to think or believe in the Pacific that the Palang foods are better than the Fijian, Samoan, Melanesian food, Polynesian, Micronesian. That somehow it has got into our brain, the food that you buy from the market is better and higher value than the foods that we plant. Mind you, Robert, I've been trying to get nutrition in Fiji to change. But I thank COVID for coming in. Now we are planting and running out of seeds. So the COVID itself has had an effect on NCD. I've been preaching and trying to tell people to eat from the land. The COVID has forced them that way. So that's one thing I'm thankful for COVID for, that people have moved back to the fruits in the land, and agriculture and the shops are running out of seeds for the diet. But it's also had a positive impact.
Absolutely. No, you're not the first person who said that to me. And I think that the idea of convenience is it's not convenient anymore. Convenience foods are not convenient. They represent bad health. They represent buying rather than growing. And growing is being, as you mentioned, popularized through the COVID reflection. And Dr. Tukana, you're very aware of what the mission behind Pacific Island Food Revolution is. How do you see our role? How do you see our value in the NCD space?
Now, NCD, the core in NCD, as well as COVID, you learned it also, is communication. Communication for behavior change. And I see the role of Pacific Island Food Revolution is exactly that. Communicating that Pacific foods is the answer to the Pacific crisis, NCD crisis, number one. And number two, I can also see it as an education. It's not only communication, but education for behavior change. And having said that, we know, I keep telling this to our people from the developed countries, you must know that most of the Pacific Island population are children. And it's important that we educate children through this fantastic network, through PIFR, to educate, but more importantly, to educate our children to note, to have the knowledge that the answer to our NCD crisis is in our foods, and the foods can be planted in the Pacific.
Yeah, fantastic. It is tantalizingly close when you understand it, isn't it? You know, I don't really know what moved the profile of imported foods into that high status position, but I certainly can say that the reason we designed Pacific Island Food Revolution to be a television series and to have that high level, high quality appeal is because we firmly believe, and we know, that Pacific foods do belong actually on the top of thinking for Pacific people. It's about placing it back there, first choice. Yeah.
And also getting the people who are experts in that area, like yourself, and in this space here. Look, the doctors have been saying it, but now we have a group of people in the space of foods.
Right.
And want to communicate it well. I think that was also an important point, that you have people who champion food as a social issue rather than a medical issue.
Really good point. Yeah. I'm going to use that line, Dr. Tukana. Hey, I also note that you are a preacher. I didn't know that you're a man of the church, and the church is super important in the Pacific. And one thing that we speak about in Pacific Island Food Revolution is that the Pacific is actually the Garden of Eden. I mean, I don't know if there's many places on Earth where nature itself is throwing beautiful food. The opportunity for good health is being thrown at people all the time. Talk to me about how you see the role of theology and religion in this space around eating and Pacific foods?
Yeah, in the Fiji context, particularly the Christianity, which is predominantly in the Pacific. But you can, I've also talked to leaders of the other spiritualities, and they also have it. They confess they have food as one of their. Speaking to the Pacific, and you look at the Garden of Eden, as you said, it's clearly written there that the day 3, if you read on the Genesis, the day 3 creation, that's where our food should come from. They are land foods. It was created on day 3. And then you have other foods created in day 5, which is the fish and the birds. And then day 6 are the animals and ourselves. So basically, we who bash the Bible need to focus on day 3 food. And day 3 food, as long as we are living on Fiji Islands, there's food there in the land. You just have to cultivate it and eat it. If you want to move to day 5, day 6, there are 3 menus right there on Genesis 1. If we all shift back there, if we believe in this God who we say he is God, then we need to move back to that space. That's the theological. It's already there.
Right.
Priority, day 5, if we want to have some of that, and day 6. But day 3 was initially meant for us.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's actually, you can say that food choices ultimately are a matter of faith as well, because the instruction is right there, Genesis day 3.
Yeah.
It's
and also in Genesis 3, when the bad guy came in, he also worked on food.
Oh, yes.
The problem is a food-based problem. So
right.
we are always, it will always be food in whatever context, the good food and the bad food. It's all
right.
Yeah. And I just find in medicine that any intervention in medicine without food intervention will not work.
Right.
From a theological perspective also.
Interesting. And I just want to note that the food in the Bible is the apple, and the apple in Fiji is an imported food.
That's right. That's right. And I keep saying to Fijians, value of vitamin C, you need to eat 1 guava. The value of vitamin C in 1 guava, you have to eat 35 apples.
Right.
The value of vitamin C in 1 guava. So the education people keep telling me, well, we've taught the children that an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I said, you keep that's correct, because they were taught by the apple people.
That's
you know, the guava. Yeah. Now, if an apple a day keeps the doctor away, then a guava a day keeps the doctor 35 days away. You don't rebut the initial one, but put it in perspective that 1 guava keeps the doctor 35 days away.
I'm getting the impression that your ultimate goal is to put yourself out of business. That would be a dream, wouldn't it? To be moving into a progressive space rather than a responsive space. You know. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to throw some words at you, and I'm going to get you to respond just top of mind what your gut response to those words are. The first one is white rice.
White rice? No good.
Tell me more.
It's polished. It cannot beat cassava and dalo and kumala and breadfruit, white rice, because it's processed. I keep shifting back to day 3. Day 3 foods is still better than processed foods.
And the same goes for white flour, of course.
Yes.
Highly refined, low in nutrition. How about fatty foods?
Fatty foods, coconut, still better than the other ones. I mean, we've lived on coconuts all our life, and no one had hypercholesterolemia because the coconut is still there. But now we've just moved from coconut milk to virgin coconut oil, which is the shift that we can make. But coconut is, if we have to go back to oil in the Pacific, coconut is still number 1.
What about taro leaves?
Taro leaf is one of our top iron-rich foods. It's readily available. Everyone in the Pacific knows about taro. If you don't know about taro, you must be from outer space. In the Pacific context.
That's another line I'm going to use. What about what about fizzy drinks? And where do you think the addiction to sugar comes in? How did that develop in the Pacific?
It developed in the early stages of life. Now, if you look at it technically, taste is developed from the mother to the child. So the first 5 years is when the taste, you acquire the taste. Mm. The mother is addicted to sugary drinks, she passes on to the child, and then she'll definitely pass it on to the child because she's drinking it already. Mm. So the question of where, when is, that's why I keep going back. In the Pacific Islands, we have to be prospective or progressive. We need to start from pregnancy and the first 5 years of life. That's where the taste acquisition happens. And that's where we should target more, the mother and child health in our context. Yeah?
It's interesting, in the sphere of meditation, it's acknowledged the child, the first 7 years of the child, is when everything is learned from the environment. So that includes appetites, taste, what is good, what is bad, emotional relationships. They all fit into that first 7 years of a person's personal evolution.
It makes absolute sense, because also in the first 5 years of life, the brain develops. So if the brain is developing from the second week of pregnancy to the 5th year, you need to program it. The brain is just sitting there, you need to program it, and taste comes as one of the programs, no? So when they are saying it's important the first 7 years of life, it's linked to brain development. You need to program the brain in the first 7 years of life, and that's when they acquire the taste. Salt, oil, and sugar is acquired. The brain needs to be programmed. Yeah?
Dr. Tukana, what is your dream for the Pacific?
Get back to the Pacific foods, please. Get back to the Pacific foods. Eat from the Pacific foods. It will solve our problems of NCD and also diseases like COVID, CD. It's prevention. Just like we give vaccines to prevent us against communicable diseases like measles and typhoid, food is the immunization for all diseases, whether it's communicable diseases like COVID or non-communicable diseases. I mean, how else do you explain the Fijian situation? In the absence of medicine, we were able to tackle our 18 cases.
Right.
Now, social distancing is one, that's physical barrier, and coughing etiquette and all of that. But I believe it's the immunization, that if we eat our food well, the virus has no chance to attack.
Yeah.
It has a chance of hitting us. The COVID example is telling me that we need to shift back to the Pacific foods to prevent us from those things. And the COVID example is a clear example where we don't have a medical explanation, but we have a nutrition explanation.
Yeah, I mean, the relation between nutrition and immunity, once again, is where people like me and people like you need to come together and develop a relevant and actionable response for people to bring into their daily lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. Keep to the progressive side. We don't have to react. We have to learn that whatever we are talking about, immunization and all that, needs to start from pregnancy in the first 5 to 7 years. That's where you need to create the behavior that we want to create.
Great. Now, Dr. Tukana, I hear that you are leaving your role as NCD Adviser soon. Do you have plans that you want to tell us about?
Until NCD in the Pacific is controlled, I'm just changing bubbles. I'm not technical now. I'm moving to tradition and theology kind of things. But the target remains NCD. I've done 28 years of NCD work, medical perspective. I need to move to a non-medical perspective. I have found that if NCD is a disease of social origin, then the solution must be social.
Got it.
In the context of the Pacific. You can't treat a social issue with a medical solution.
Right.
We need to treat diseases of social causes through social means. And I think the Vanua and also the Lotu are two important platforms. So as I said, in today's context, I'm just changing bubbles.
Got it.
To non-medical.
Got it. Well, listen, I hope to bump into your bubble at some point. I certainly appreciate the need for the further development of food theology and the language and tools associated with that. And I hope that we continue to work together in that space. I don't know if you know how much you shaped Pacific Island Food Revolution, but those first meetings with you gave it absolute direction. So I'll always be grateful to you for that, Dr. Tukana, always. And I hope we continue to work together for a long, long time. Thank you for your time today. Great to see you. Hopefully it'll be in person next time when the big bubbles open. I want to thank the New Zealand and Australian governments for so generously supporting Pacific Island Food Revolution and having the vision to believe that Pacific food culture is the solution to Pacific health problems. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mother Manda.
Mother Manda.
Yeah.